today it's wonderful. It has been almost pathetic for the past few weeks, but today it's in its good flow.
Wild guess? Maybe a medicine? No? A sign? Yeah? Yeah.
Just going to nip in, I don't normally, but just look at this purple again. It really is rather special. Like I say, you don't see it for very long, so you guys are actually here on a great day to see this. Like I say, quite beautiful. Has anybody heard of a lady called Beatrix Potter? Is that a yes? Yep. Beatrix is probably one of the most famous adopted daughters of the Lake District. She wasn't born here, she was born in London. But she visited here on her 16th birthday, and she fell in love with the place. And eventually it was to become her home. Now, Beatrix was born into a very wealthy Victorian family. And Beatrix wanted to be a scientist. She wanted to study mycology. That's the study of mushrooms and fungus. That's what she wanted to do. But her mother put a stop to it. Her mother said, no, you can't do that. You can't possibly do that. You're a lady. You can't do science. But anyway, to cut a very long story short, because the story of Beatrix Potter and the Lake District is huge, it takes hours. So just for now, what I'm going to say is that Beatrix had a great friend that she met here in the Lake District, a gentleman called Hardwick Rawnsley. And Hardwick Rawnsley's conservation was all about preserving what we've got, rather than conservation like we talk of today, where we're trying to restore things to what they were. So it is slightly different in that term. But he was a great conservationist, and he did a huge amount here in the Lake District to protect it. Beatrix met him at this birthday party she had when she was 16, and they sat down and they chatted for hours, and they became firm, lifelong friends. They were friends from that point on until for the rest of their lives. And Hardwick, as well as being a conservationist, he was a reverend in the Church of England, and he also was a poet. He used to write sonnets, and he had some experience of getting these published. When Beatrix's first story came about, The Tale of Peter Rabbit, well, he helped Beatrix get that published. None of the publishing houses in London would take Beatrix on, so what he did was help us self-publish it. It was an immediate success, and Beatrix, as I'm sure you all are well aware, she went on to be a very, very successful children's author, and she made a huge amount of money from it. She really was a very wealthy lady in her own right. But when Beatrix was writing her stories, she used to write about real places and real people. And every one of her children's stories were based here in the Lake District. And one of them is the story of Mrs. Tiggywinkle, the little hedgehog. And Mrs. Tiggywinkle climbed to the very top of Cat Bells, and she was so very afraid. Because as she looked down from the top, she was so high up, she could see straight down the chimney pots of Little Town below. Now, just to our right hand side, this is Cat Bells. It's a 4-hump mountain. The very top of it is actually in the clouds at the moment, but you can see the lower humps farther down, so you can just see those two there. And Little Town is the little village that you can see just beyond it. And like I said, this is how Beatrix created all of her stories. Real places real people, just animal characters were the creation of her imagination. And one of the rangers from the National Trust in Penrith has actually identified almost all of the places where Beatrix would have actually sat and done the illustrations for her books. You can get yourself a copy of this. It takes about 6 days to do the whole thing. It does take rather a long time. But you can visit 95% of the sites that Beatrix would have sat down, done her illustrations, and perhaps even penned a few lines of the story. And all of this is included in the pack that you get from the National Trust, so you can actually sit there with the image and see where Beatrix would have been. Like I said, absolute must for Beatrix Potter fans, and an interesting couple of days out if you just want a good way of exploring the Lake District. Now, earlier on I said it was almost impossible to build a new house in the Lake District. Well, when anything's almost impossible, that means there is a way around it. And the way around it is to buy an old derelict property and then rebuild on the foundations of that property. And there's an example of that coming up just now. This is known as the Purple House, and you'll notice it's got a purple front door. And this is in reverence to the fact it used to be a purple barn, a wooden barn. And it had fallen into disrepair, and whoever it is that actually owns this actually bought it, got permission to demolish it, and then build this rather wonderful property in its place. This is now a bed and breakfast, and you can actually go and stay there. Not something I'd necessarily recommend in January or February, but during the rest of the year it really is quite a wonderful place. If you have a quick look at this plant that's growing on our left hand side and just about everywhere that you can see, this is bracken. And bracken is not a native plant of the Lake District. Travelling south from Scotland, you do get it in other parts of the UK, but like I say, it shouldn't be here in the Lake District, and it's become a bit of a problem because, as you can see, it's absolutely everywhere. It's an incredibly invasive plant, and it's got to the point where the National Trust have been trying to do something about it. They need to get rid of it somehow, so they've tried all sorts of things. One of them is to burn it away. That doesn't work. They've tried digging it up. That doesn't work either. And all of this is because of something called rhizomes that grow as part of the root structure. If you don't remove these rhizomes, then the plant can regrow again. So that's where it's been a major problem. And it is crowding out our native species like the ferns and the heathers, so this is one of the reasons why they're trying to get rid of it. The other reason is it's carcinogenic, and there is a belief that it can cause problems for people. It doesn't affect our sheep as such, because the sheep don't actually try and eat it, but unfortunately humans, they run their hands through it and they pick it and they do all sorts of things with it. So it really isn't the most nicest of plants. So a new method to get rid of it is just on our left hand side. This is something they're trying. What they've done is they've taken away all the topsoil. Looks like there's been a big landslide, but there hasn't. So they removed all the topsoil, and then they will eventually bring that back. It's been taken away, sterilised and stored in a warehouse for a couple of years in very dark conditions. All of this is designed to destroy the root system, and if it works, they reckon it will take 60 years to clear the Lake District of bracken. And this is typical of the national parks and of the National Trust, because they're not just doing things for tomorrow, they're doing things for the distant future as well. It's all about preservation and making sure things are just as they should be. So we're waiting for the soil to come back. It should have happened last year, but I don't think I need to tell you that we had a few problems last year and this year, and as a result it hasn't happened yet. So we're just coming up on a bit of a cattle grid. We've been across plenty that don't cause any problems, but this one can be a bit of a rattler. So if you've got anything loose on your knee or anything like that, anything that can fall on the floor, please just hang on to it until we're certainly on the other side of this cattle grid. Then this road into Braithwaite is quite a narrow road, and they can travel along here a little bit too fast. So again, it's a good idea, if you've got anything loose, just hang on to it till we get to Braithwaite. Before, a little village called Portinscale. It sits from the very edge of Derwent Water. It's out towards our right hand side at the moment. Now Portinscale is a rather lovely village. It's a very genteel village where you often see ladies sat outside the tea rooms sipping cups of tea, and the gentlemen will be playing cricket on the green, so you'll hear the thwack of leather on willow as they're playing their game. But it doesn't describe the name Portinscale, because Portinscale has a very checkered history. Its name means whorehouse, and it is where the ladies of the night used to ply their trade to the miners, who used to dig graphite in this area, or wad as it was known locally. And wad miners, or graphite miners, were very, very wealthy miners. The price of graphite was actually very, very high. It was more expensive than gold in its day. So, like I say, it was really, they were really rather well paid for the miners. And that's what used to go on in Portinscale. But graphite was so expensive for one simple reason. It was used for the manufacture of cannonballs. And what you would do is you would line the mould of the cannonball with graphite. And then when it was cast, you would end up with a very, very smooth surface. And it was that smooth surface that gave you the advantage, because it meant the cannonball would fly farther and truer than what your enemies were using. And the Royal Navy on more than one occasion actually credited their success at sea battles with the quality, accuracy and range of the cannonball that was being fired. And like I say, that was all due to graphite. Now, because graphite was so valuable, quite often some of the miners would try to sneak a little bit home to actually sell it illegally. Now, with miners of graphite, you could always spot them because their hands were stained black. Working with the material would stain the skin permanently. And if you were offered a piece of graphite on a blank palm, well, you could assume that it was stolen. And this is where the term the black market actually came from, offering something illegal on the palm of a stained hand. Now, like I said, all of that from graphite. Graphite had a couple of other uses. It was of course used in pencils, and the very first pencil factory was based here in Braithwaite, in this little village. It went on to become the Derwent Pencil Factory, and that was in Keswick until just a couple of years ago, and it's still making pencils today, just not in Cumbria anymore. That's actually being made in Lancashire. Its other use, because graphite is a very pure form of carbon, was in the manufacture of gunpowder. We had quite a number of gunpowder factories in the Lake District, because when you were operating more than 60 different mines, you needed an awful lot of explosives to actually get the materials out of the ground. One of the most famous gunpowder factories here was the Langdale Estate. It's in the very south of the Lake District, near a little place called Elterwater. and that was owned by a gentleman called Alfred Nobel. You might know of him. He was the gentleman who established the Nobel Prizes, and that of course was from his profits of selling explosives, particularly dynamite, which is something he went on to invent. Now we're just joining the A66. This is a fast road, I mentioned it a little earlier. Just while we're on this, I'll just be being quiet, just concentrate on the driving.